I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, March the 13th, 2014. Israel was hit by a barrage of rocket fire last night with over 60 rockets launched at the southern town of Sderot from Islamic Jihad terrorists in Gaza in the largest scale rocket attack on Israel since 2012. The Iron Dome missile defense system stationed in Sderot shot down 3 of the rockets. Most of them, however, exploded in open areas. 8 exploded in built-up areas. None, however, caused any injury. Later, several rockets also landed in Ashdod and Ashkelon in open fields. Israel's Air Force responded to the wave of violence and struck 29 terror targets across the Gaza Strip. Islamic Jihad took responsibility for the rocket attacks on Israel, claiming that more than 90 rockets and shells had been fired at Israel, and threatened more and longer-range attacks if the IDF retaliated. Israel's Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon said Israel would not tolerate such attacks. He said, "We will not allow Islamic Jihad or any other element in the Strip to disrupt life in the south." He said it won't be quiet in Gaza either, in a way that will cause Islamic Jihad terrorists to regret the attacks they carried out. The White House condemned the rocket fire on Israel. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki released a statement yesterday saying the United States condemns in the strongest terms today's rocket attacks into Israel by terrorists from the Gaza Strip. It is reprehensible that dozens of rockets have been fired today alone. There is no justification for such attacks. We call for these terrorist attacks to cease immediately. Israel, like any nation, the State Department said, has a right to defend itself. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also released a condemnation. Ban's press office said today the Secretary General strongly condemns the multiple rocket attacks on Israel from Gaza, for which Islamic Jihad has claimed responsibility. Ban called for calm and restraint from all sides. And visiting British Prime Minister in Israel, David Cameron, said he was appalled at the rocket attacks, calling the random attacks on Israeli civilians barbaric. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to condemn the rocket attacks as well, just before Abbas was set to meet with Cameron today. Later, at a press conference held between Abbas and Cameron in Bethlehem, French news agency AFP reported that Abbas made a general condemnation of the recent escalation in violence between Israel and Gaza. Abbas said, "We condemn all military escalation, including rockets." In his remarks, Abbas also condemned Israel's killing of 3 Islamic Jihad members in Gaza earlier this week who were about to fire mortars at Israel, saying that Israel killed them, quote, "in cold blood." Meanwhile, an Islamic Jihad official stated later today, after the IAF retaliatory strikes, that a ceasefire in the hostilities had been reached. Islamic Jihad official Khalid al-Bach wrote on Facebook that following intensive Egyptian contacts and efforts, the agreement for calm has been restored in accordance with understandings reached in 2012 in Cairo, referring to the truce reached with Egypt at the end of Operation Pillar of Defense in the Israel-Gaza conflict of 2012. Israel has not responded to that statement, but a senior defense official said that he expected the fighting to settle down soon. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that he was still hopeful that a deal could be reached between Israel and the Palestinians. Kerry addressed a hearing yesterday on the 2015 State Department budget request, where he said that while mistrust between Israel and the Palestinians was higher than ever, and it would be difficult, that it was still possible that the sides could come to, quote, "some kind of understanding of the road forward towards reaching a framework agreement that would extend peace talks beyond the upcoming deadline at the end of April." Kerry said there were still significant gaps, obstacles to overcome, but said that those gaps needed to be viewed in the context of the negotiations. Kerry said certain narrative issues are so powerful and so difficult that neither leader is going to definitively cede on them at an early stage of the negotiation. But Kerry said he believes that both parties are serious and want to find a way forward. The World Jewish Congress called on the United Nations Human Rights Council to recognize bans on Jewish rituals as violations of religious freedom. WJC CEO Robert Singer called on the council to stop attempts to ban and limit the right to practice Jewish and Muslim ritual slaughter or shechita of animals and of the ritual of male circumcision in light of recent actions across Europe against those rituals. He said, "We call on the governments of all UN member states to stop any attempts to abridge these crucial religious freedoms." Singer urged the Council via its special rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief to issue a clear statement that such bans or limitations are, quote, attacks on fundamental liberties, and that the affirmation of those liberties will serve to deter such attacks. Lisa Rahmani, who is a member of the World Jewish Congress's Jewish Diplomatic Corps, expressed the group's sentiment at the UNHRC meeting in Geneva yesterday. Police in Tokyo say they have arrested a man suspected of being tied to the recent vandalism of hundreds of copies of the Diary of Anne Frank across the capital. The man is said to be in his 30s and reportedly admitted to having some part in the vandalism. He is reportedly also seen in security footage from several locations where the incidents took place, suggesting his involvement. As we reported to you, pages were ripped out of 265 copies of the Diary of Anne Frank in libraries and bookstores across Tokyo last month. The vandalism was shocking to many, as Anne's diary is studied and held in great esteem in Japan. Reportedly, 30,000 Japanese tourists visit the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam every year. Japan also happens to be the only East Asian country with statues and a museum in memory of Anne Frank. Metal stamps that were used to tattoo Jewish prisoners at the Auschwitz Nazi death camp have been found and are now on display at the Auschwitz Museum in Poland. Museum director Dr. Piotr Szywinski said the find was one of the most significant recent discoveries. He said, "We couldn't believe that original tools for tattooing prisoners could be discovered after such a long time." He said even a tattooed number is rare to be seen now as the last prisoners pass away. He said the metal stamps that were found were of great value as they would speak of what took place at the camps decades ago. The stamps had needles embedded in them that would be soaked in ink and then were cruelly tattooed onto the bodies of the camp's prisoners, creating specific numbers. Their discovery comes 70 years since the death camp's liberation. The Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation donated $10 million to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., funds that will go towards the museum's Holocaust Study Center. Museum Director Sarah Bloomfield said that the Mandel family generously helped establish the museum in its early years, and now through this campaign gift, they are helping us lay the foundation for the institution's future, ensuring the permanence of Holocaust memory, relevance, and understanding. The Study Center will be renamed the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies. Chairman and CEO Morton Mandel said his family was pleased to have their name on one of the world's principal venues for Holocaust scholarship. Israel and Canada are partnering on autism research for the first time. The first Canada-Israel Autism Research Symposium was held at Hebrew University in Jerusalem earlier this month, bringing together researchers from Israel, Canada, and North America. The event was organized by the Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorders Research Hub at the Institute for Medical Research Israel, Canada, and the Canadian Friends of the Hebrew University. The gathering was aimed at creating partnerships in autism research and to share expertise, treatment, and research needs between the countries. And turning to our Shalom TV programming for tonight, Thursday, March the 13th, more coverage from the recent AIPAC National Policy Conference held in Washington, D.C. continues tonight at 7 o'clock, with remarks from New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez and from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. At 9 o'clock, veteran Jewish comedian Jackie Mason joins Mark Golub on L'chaim. And then at 10 this evening, the opening reception of Light and Shadows, a new exhibit from Israel's Beit HaTfutzot, Museum of the Jewish People, which is now at Yeshiva University Museum at the Center for Jewish History in New York City, which tells the story of the Jews of Iran. The exhibit is on display through April the 27th. That's all coming up tonight here on Shalom TV and ShalomTV.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, March the 13th, 2014. I'm Teisha Bader.